Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, people of all races, colors, and creeds, welcome back to the greatest show on earth, the Investigative Journal. I'm your host, Greg Anthony, and today I want to talk about the roots of socialism and communism. Who created those forms of oppressive governments, and what is going on today in America, and how the people that created these oppressive forms of government are actually bringing them to fruition in this country. Now, there are probably more Marxists on the faculty of our elite colleges than there are in all of Russia and Eastern Europe today. And can you imagine what the world would be like without America? Now, I'm going to read you a quote about what's going on in this country today. And it's this, quote, "If we can effectively kill the national pride and patriotism of just one generation, we will have won that country. Therefore, there must be continued propaganda abroad to undermine the loyalty of citizens in general, and teenagers in particular, by making drugs of various kinds readily available, by creating the necessary attitude of chaos, idleness, and worthlessness, and by preparing them psychologically and politically, we can succeed." Now, who do you guess said that? Was it Bernie Sanders? Was it Alessandro Ocasio-Cortez? Was it Hillary Clinton? Was it Joe Biden? Of course not. Was it Donald Trump? Of course not. Those last two guys supposedly are on the other side. But are they? But actually, who said that is one of Bernie Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez's mentors. Guess who it was? It was Lenin. Yes, Lenin. Who said that? Lenin, who was killed by Stalin. Stalin, who was controlled by who? The Jesuits and the Vatican, who actually created socialism and communism. And so they're doing the same thing today. So if we go back to Bernie Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez, just to name a couple people that are in the news constantly now, for the last year you've heard in America, mainstream media every day talk about socialism. Well, you never talk about where it comes from, who these people really are. And if Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders are truthful to you, they are going to tell you that they're hiding the real creators, their real mentors. And those are the people living right down in Georgetown University. And let me tell you what happens there. That is the first Jesuit university in America, right next to the Vatican, right next to the White House. What's the difference, really, when you really get down to it? And most people don't know this. Well, first of all, before I say anything, let me make a few comments, and we'll get back to socialism and the roots of socialism. But who would you rather listen to? Would you rather listen to this show and enjoy yourself by hearing things that you don't hear every day, hearing things that have been hidden from you for centuries? And then after hearing those things, you can basically make up your mind whether it's a conspiracy theory, maybe do a little bit more research, maybe use the wheels spinning in your head for something more than just regurgitating what you hear on the mainstream. Yeah, so who would you rather listen to? Me doing this so it actually could make you think, make you disagree with me, agree with me? Or would you rather just listen to the nonsense that you hear on Fox News and on CNN? And I'm going to tell you, both of them are pushing an agenda for a reason, a hidden agenda. For example, what Lenin said here, by it's necessary to create the attitude of chaos, that's what they're doing. Because by pushing the left-wing socialist agenda now, or even the moderate Democrat agenda, they have to push against somebody else, right? So who are they pushing against? What Lenin says here is you have to effectively get rid of national pride, patriotism, and do that for at least one generation, and then you've won the country. So basically what's happening here is they're pushing against the Trump people who are patriotic, who are Americans, and they're doing it mostly with young people. So once basically this young generation has been propagandized by the statement I made above that stated that there are probably more Marxists, Leninists, communists, socialists on the faculty of our colleges than there are even in Russia and Eastern Europe, you're going to have to imagine what the world would be like without America. What do you think it's going to be like? Well, I think it's one of the last stands that we have in patriotism. It's one of the stronger countries, right? And once you get rid of that, once you bring in socialism here, you've basically created your one world government, your one world order, maybe in different forms around the world, but easily controlled, right? Easily led by the nose right to the water trough, and then they'll force you to drink. But yes, so we have this chaos, as Lenin said here, creating this attitude of chaos, this idea of worthlessness, psychologically and politically preparing you for their victory, and that is to really change over America. Now, you hear it all the time on the right-wing news channels, especially Fox. Then you can go to OANN, One American News Network, another conservative network cropping up. And what you're hearing there is this patriotic push, America first. You're hearing that the Constitution is being destroyed by the left wing. You're hearing statements from them that their idea is to destroy America. I'm not saying that. That's what they're saying, even in the halls of your Congress. The conservative congressional leaders, conservative congressional members of Congress, and the Senate are actually stating that the Democratic Party wants to destroy America. And they're supposedly protecting the sacredness of our Constitution. So, isn't this really what's going on here? Now, you're wondering why it's going on and who created this. Well, do you think that in a country like America, that, look, I'm not saying that it's the greatest place in the world. I'm not saying there aren't problems. But unless this is an orchestrated effort, if there's not someone behind the scenes pulling the strings, making sure there's this chaos, I'm convinced that you wouldn't have a two-party system that is so divided right now. I'm convinced you would have people who have ideological differences in certain things, but they could come together for the good of the American people and really enforce the Constitution. But they don't, because you have one side who is saying that the socialist Democrats now are destroying America. They're going to take away your guns, your Second Amendment rights. They're going to take away your Fourth Amendment rights. They're going to take away every right that you have, even the right of owning your own property. You've heard that. You have people on the Democratic side now saying that they would like to take away private ownership of property. They're also saying they want to take away your guns. Now, you're seeing that in Virginia right now, aren't you? It always happens in the states first, the states controlled now by this Socialist Democratic Party. And what they're doing in Virginia is wanting to pass a law to get rid of guns in the hands of good people. Now, you can see this would not go on if there wasn't an orchestrated effort to do this, if they didn't take their marching orders from somebody who's done it before. Because I don't believe these politicians are smart enough to do this. I believe they're placed in positions by the powers that be, the ones that control these people. Now, if you look at a lot of these liberals, they come from Jesuit universities. They come teaching a Jesuit doctrine. Now, many people don't even know what that is. That's the real sad thing here. And that's what we try to do on this show. And that's why it's probably better to listen to my show than it is to listen to these other people that are just leading you by the nose in one way or another. For example, if you consider yourself a Republican now, you're going to listen to Fox News and probably throw up if you turn on CNN. That's how bad it gets. And if you're if you're a socialist Democrat now and hate Trump, the same thing goes for you. You're going to listen to CNN and then probably throw up when you turn on Fox News. And I bet you many people can't even turn those stations on anymore. So how can you have an effective dialogue of views that differ if you don't listen to the opposing views? That's what America was built on. But it's not, and that's exactly how it's going to be destroyed. And do you think that if there were people, honest people on the left and the right in our government, this would go on? No. It would be very boring, wouldn't it be? It would be politicians going into their jobs, actually doing their jobs. Instead of raising money from corporate people and raising money from, private people everywhere in this country, just to go there and fight over these issues that have nothing to do with creating roads, with creating better hospitals, with creating a better educational system. But you see, the people at the top that are controlling these politicians don't want that, because you can't destroy a country that way. No, you can destroy it by what Lenin said. And you have to understand that Lenin was a mouthpiece for the Jesuit order. And he said you can effectively kill the national pride and patriotism of just one generation. We can control a country. We can basically turn it into a socialist country. Now, why would these people want to do that? Very simple. It's easier to control people if you don't have people who think for themselves. Take away that. Take away the opportunity for people to think for themselves, to educate themselves, to raise their families the way they believe is right, whether it be a Christian family, an atheist family, a whatever family. Then you have a problem, because you can't control these kind of people. And secondly, you can't control people and take away their property if they're going to defend their property, right? It's going to make it a lot messier, right? A lot more difficult. So basically what you have to do is you have to change the system through education, through miseducation. And once you do that, and once you make drugs available, as Lenin said, making drugs of various kinds readily available, what does it do? It numbs a population's senses. It numbs their ability to think. And that's why the war on drugs is basically not the war on drugs, but it's a war on the American people with the government, allowing drugs to come into this country and working hand and foot with the drug dealers, the drug cartels, to allow this influx of drugs to come in. Because once you have a drug population, and then once you miseducate a population, you can take it over without firing a weapon. So, what I'm trying to mention here is that that's why it's really better to listen to shows like this, because you can listen to the left wing right now, and they're espousing socialism. They're saying, look at this, look at what's happening in America. They want to throw America out, everything. You're seeing it every day. They want to get rid of all the national monuments. They want to get rid of, basically, any history about America. They want to call everybody a racist unless you open our borders. And how do you have a country when there's no borders? Tell me that. You don't. but they want to open them up and really destroy this country. Now, the right wing fights back by stating, no, we want to keep American principles. So it's this constant chaos between the two, dividing the country into basically 50-50. That's what you have right now. And if you don't think what Lenin says is what they're planning, then think about this. 41% of young Democrats right now, approve of socialism. And that's basically going to change in the next decade. So it's a slow process. These people do not operate in systems of 4 to 8 years. They operate in systems of generations, of passing this on from generation to generation through the 1 or 2% of the people with the money, with the power that control us. And so we try to get to the bottom of who are these people. Where do they come from? And we've done numerous shows about it, but when you specifically talk about socialism, socialism was created in the 1600s with the Jesuit, this was in Paraguay, called the Paraguay Reductions, and other activities they were doing in South America. And I'm going to get into that a little bit deeper, because we've talked about it many times, and move past that to showing you how they've controlled that movement to push it into Russia, to push it into now Venezuela, and to push it now into America. And so we can look at some of the things going on in this country today, which really show you that they are definitely in the ones that should be called the mentors of socialism. And if OAC and all of these other people like Bernie Sanders were honest with you, they would tell you that, because they know. But listen, what else? Before I do that in the second half hour, let me make a couple comments about what we hear a lot now. Besides the educational system in our universities being basically dismantled and replaced with Marxist communist views, we have a problem going on in our justice system, and that's another way to destroy a country. And that is to take away the rule of law. Now, there's no system in the world that's completely foolproof from any type of corruption. But on the basis of looking at different systems of justice throughout the world, America's isn't too bad when you look at it theoretically. When you look at the way the Constitution is formed, the very rights that we do have as people, it's one of the better systems. And to watch it be destroyed is terrible, because it's one way to destroy a country. And what basically they're doing now is showing you that right in front of your eyes. But it means very little if you don't know why they're doing it, right? It means very little. If you still remain in that mindset that, well, it's the left and the right fighting, and I want to get on the side of the one of those sides, then I'm going to win. You're wrong, because you're going to lose no matter what if you want to fight for the Constitution of the United States. Because by doing this, by these two groups fighting each other, you're seeing how they manipulate the justice system. And people right now are shaking their heads because of what's going on in Washington. And let me give you an example. It appears, and I'm going to make, you've heard this statement before, it appears that, and I'm just talking about the higher levels of government here, the people at the top that are being charged or not charged with crimes. I'm not going to get into criminal reform in other aspects of our society, which are, in many cases, need reforming. But let's just talk about what you hear on the news. So what you hear basically politically is that if you're on the side of the Republicans, the conservatives, you're going to be charged by the Department of Justice for these process crimes of lying to Congress, lying to the FBI, other things we call process crimes. Okay? Now, if you're on the side of the Democrats, the Socialist Democrats, you can do the exact same things and not be charged. So the Americans are looking at this and going, well, why? That's not fair. They're allowing these people to get away with murder. In this case, I'm calling it process crimes. But we're not allowing the other people on the other side to get away with that, and they're being charged. So why is that going on? Well, let me make a blunt statement. They're showing you that if you're on the side of globalism, if you're on the side of socialism, if you're on the side of Hillary Clinton, if you're on the side of these people, they can get away with what they want. Joe Biden, all these people. But if you're on the side of the Republicans, the conservatives, Donald Trump, any of these people, you're going to jail. All right. Why are they doing that? Because they want to create chaos. It's very simple. And I can give you an example. Now, I'm not going to go back to Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton's crimes of the hit list, the hundreds or so people that may have seen their demise because of these two. But let's just talk about Hillary Clinton when she became Secretary of State. She was charged with having a private server, just like you have in front of you, a computer with your private server, and she was allowed to put all government documents and all state secrets. If you're the Secretary of State, you have everything there. All of our country's secrets. She was allowed to do that. She had it in her house. And she could write emails and talk to people from China, talk to people from the Ukraine, everywhere, without anybody knowing, right? So when this was found out, they said basically, this all came to a head maybe 3 years ago, right? Well, when this was found out, she destroyed evidence. She destroyed and bleached, bit, and threw away some 33,000 emails. Now, why wasn't it 34? 33 is really an occult number they use all the time. Okay? But anyway, she destroyed 33,000 emails. At that time, Jim Comey, the head of the FBI, came out on TV after they did this kind of no investigation whatsoever. And he went through each element of that the crimes that she had committed. And all of those elements of these process crimes of giving away secrets, of destroying evidence, of putting our national security in jeopardy, were proven. Every element of a crime has to be proven before a prosecutor is even going to think about bringing it. So Comey gets up and says that to us, but then says, but we're not bringing charges because no reasonable prosecutor would bring this case. Oh, really? He's not a prosecutor. He's the FBI, the guy who does the investigations, but he made the decision for these corrupt people to not prosecute her. So she's let go. Then guess what? One after the other you're seeing now are let go. I'm going to finish this. I'm running out of time here, but I think you're getting my gist of what they're trying to do here. And they're trying to do it because in the end, once you put all this stuff together, whether it be in 4 years, 8 years, 10 years, this country is going to see a radical change. And it's going to come from the educational system, a destruction of the justice system, and everything you're seeing right now. And it's not going to be pretty. So I ask you this question. I'm going to leave you with this for the break. Imagine a world without America. Just do that for a moment. What's it going to look like? Back in 3 minutes on The Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn, the Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour, and remember, as the promo said, the Jesuit High Command is listening. That means the Catholics in Action, CIA, are listening. The NSA are listening. Everyone's listening, but who cares? You know, when the truth is given out, most people that reject it are those who don't want to look into things deeply, or those who want to cover it up, because if the truth be told, they wouldn't have a job. So it's that simple. But anyway, Greg Anthony here on the Investigative Journal, and we're going into the roots of communism and socialism and asking the question, why don't the people pushing socialism ever give these people credit? I would love to hear Bernie Sanders say, you know something? I'm going right down to Georgetown University and shaking the hand of all those people there, and the black pope as well, the white pope, and all of you people, and let's all sit down under a statue of Ignatius Loyola and thank him for bringing socialism and your organization for bringing socialism into the world. Well, that's because we're supposed to believe in America that these guys are just priests, that this organization, the Vatican and the Jesuits, are just peace-loving God lovers spreading the word of Jesus. Well, nothing is farther from the truth. Well, they do that as a front. But the reason these people don't do it is because they're hiding something for you. And Bernie Sanders is nothing but the beginning of the end of this country. And so, and it's out in the open now. Not that they haven't been planning this for ever since the formation of America. But I'm looking at a picture right now, and you know how I like to tell you that their symbols tell us a lot about who they are. And I asked the question the other day, a very simple symbol. Nobody seems to answer it from the government. Oh, the answer I got was, those fascist symbols that they have behind the podium at the House of U.S. Representatives was put there because that was the style back then. The style? You're looking at fascist symbols behind a supposed republic and a democracy. It makes no sense. And if you look above, I can't remember whether it's a picture, it's above on the ceiling, either in the House or the Senate, I forget, I'll have to check it out. It's a picture of one of the biggest Inquisition popes in the history of the Vatican. Why would he be there? And if you go out into the rotunda, you're going to see George Washington depicted as a god. And that's an occult idea where everybody becomes gods, right? So why do we make this? Why do they do this? Because they want to show you in plain view and let you know you're too stupid to figure it out. Well, we're not here. And the people that listen here aren't too stupid to figure it out. We know what your agenda is. It's just a matter of time before you get your way. You're going to get your way. So why do you even worry about us talking about it? Oh, are you worried that it may catch on? That if you don't get the millions of people, you're not going to get the chaos like Lenin told us? You're not going to get that generation to change its values into socialist values? Well, I think that's what it is. So I'm looking at this picture, and it's in the Church of Jesus. It's an altarpiece by Jesuit artist Andrea Pozzo. He was a Jesuit in 1642 to 1709, and it features Ignatius Loyola holding a red flag, a red standard bearer flag, a huge red flag. And this was reported in the New York Times in 2008. But this thing had been buried a long time, this picture. And it just started to make sense when the rise of various 20th century political movements employed the red flag, right? Interesting. Now, let's look at this. Let's look at this carefully, okay? And we're looking at Karl Marx. The father of modern communism was himself an occultist and Freemason, intimately associated with Rome's Giuseppe Mazzini, the most powerful Freemason on the European continent, and the founder of the Mafia, and Albert Pike, the most powerful Freemason and creator of the Ku Klux Klan. Marx was privately tutored by the Jesuits, and while in a museum, while writing the Communist Manifesto, he was basically given that by the Jesuits. And based upon the 10 maxims or planks the order had perfected during the French Revolution, 1789 to 1798. So we're going to get into the Jesuit reductions of the Paraguay Reductions in the 1600s, but you're seeing that they get their fangs into Marx and Lenin writing the Marx writing the Communist Manifesto, and they're using the 10 maxims that they had established during the French Revolution, that they were deeply involved in, correct? So basically his writings were financed by the societies, the Jesuit societies, wealthy cartel capitalists, such as John D. Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, also Freemasons, who being in their doctrines and deeds were in fact the revived order of the Crusading Knights Templars. Karl Marx, A Life, and this was written by Francis Wien. Okay? So we have some background information of Marx's connections to the Jesuit order. So what does it tell you, folks? What does it really tell you? It tells you that what's going on here has a deeper roots. It has more than just a left and right-wing party that you're told about here in America. And it's up to us to get this out, because you're not going to read about it. By controlling the educational system like they do, they can hide history. They can hide anything they want. And fewer books are coming out now that are talking about this. Although we have this creation of the media and this idea of the internet giving us information at the snap of our fingers, we're getting less and less of the information that's really important so we can make a decision on this stuff. And that's how they can take over a country and create the chaos, like I mentioned earlier. Yeah, and so now, if we look, let's go back a little bit farther, okay? Let's go back to the Jesuit reductions, the Jesuit roots of socialism and communism, and ask yourself why it's never talked about. And in the 17th and 18th centuries, the order of the Jesuits began a system of missionary work called the Reductions. In order to, supposedly to Catholicize natives in Spain, Argentina, Brazil, Bolivia, in America, as well as Paraguay, which was an instrumental part of their reductions, where they created the socialist system and they tested it out. Now, these were the beginning of the communist and socialist idea of human society that dominated the 20th century and now have our country by the throat. The following I'm going to read to you is taken from R.W. Thompson's book, The Footprints of the Jesuits. And this is from page 173 to 177, written in 1894. But let me give you an aside here. I'd mentioned we've done stories on the Jesuit connections to Joseph Stalin. How many people were killed? At least 62 million people killed under a Soviet Socialist Republic, right? How about the Jesuit connections in Pope Pius XII? Vatican connections to Adolf Hitler. At least 21 million people killed from the National Socialist German Workers' Party. How about Mao Zedong? Do you understand that the Jesuits were in China during very early on in the 1600s as well? At least 49 people killed under the People's Republic of China. So why in the hell would anybody want to have a socialist system here unless they were relying on the information that was created in the 16th century moving all the way to today? Because the people I'm talking about, the Jesuit Vatican-led New World Order, are the people behind this. Now, the government, this is from R.W. Thompson's book. I'm going to read this to you. It says, the government established by them in Paraguay, this is the Jesuits, was essentially a monarchy. It could not have been otherwise under the principles of their constitution, under the false name of Christian Republic. It was, to all intents and purposes, a theocratic state, so constructed as to free it from all European influences except such as emanated from the superior at Rome. So here they go with this idea they're going to missionize and Catholicize a country, but the real idea was much different. So they divorced themselves from any type of influence in Europe at the time. All the intercourse they had with the church and the Pope was through him. And whatsoever commands he gave were uninquiringly obeyed by them, without stopping to investigate or concerning themselves, at least to know whether the church and the Pope approved or disapproved them. In order to impress the natives, the Jesuits, with their idea of their independence and their superiority over the monastic orders and the church ecclesiastics, they practiced the most artful means to persuade them to hold no intercourse with either Spaniards or the Portuguese. So they were cutting these people off from everything, right? Cutting them off from the outside world and creating this and testing out this new system, right? So upon the ground that they could not do so without encountering the example of their vices and immoralities. The unsuspecting Indians, these Paraguay people, natives, were easily seduced by acts of kindness, and the result was that, in the course of a brief period, they succeeded in establishing a number of what were called reductions, or more properly speaking, villages with multitudes of natives assembled about them. It was really what is the modern-day commune today. The whole aggregating in the end. The ends justifies the means, right? Several 100,000 of them. These constituted the Jesuit state. This was then who controlled it? A few Jesuits. And were all, by the mere ceremony of baptism, brought under Jesuit dominion. At each reduction, the natives were allowed to select a secular magistrate with limited and unimportant powers over such temporal affairs as could be entrusted to them, without impairing the theocratic feature of the government. But in order to provide against the possibility of permitting even these few temporal affairs from being conducted independently of them, they adopted the precaution of providing that before any important decision were carried into effect, they should obtain their sanction as spiritual shepherds. There never was anywhere a more thorough and complete blending of church and state that you're seeing. Never before. So basically, nothing could be done without the Jesuits approving it. Control. And that's what they want to bring here today. That's what they did in all these countries that created a socialist or a communist system. Although this state was established under the pretense that it was necessary to protect the natives and against the bad influences of the Spaniards and the Portuguese. So do you really see what they did here? They had to create an enemy, like they do here. The enemy now being, if you're on the left wing, the enemy's the right wing. If you're on the right wing, the enemy's the left wing. So they had to create this enemy. So they said to the natives, you don't want to be under the influence of these Spaniards and these Portuguese. The approval of it by the King of Spain, Philip, was obtained by the promise that every adult must pay him the tribute of $1, a consideration of chief importance with him. Philip IV was equally disposed to favor the Jesuits, presumably for the want of proper information, for it would have required but little investigation at the time to have discovered that the only motive of the Jesuits at the time for securing royal approbation in Europe was that they might ultimately acquire power to plot against European royalty itself, when it should stand in the way of their ambition. Now, it should be noted that we know that if you look back in history, you never hear this now, go to Georgetown University, where everybody goes to, all these politicians go to give these speeches and what have you, Department of Justice people, you'll see him come up to Georgetown University, Bill Barr, the rest of them. It really doesn't matter. And as an aside, what I was getting at prior to the break, when you see Hillary Clinton being let go, and then you see people like Roger Stone, you see Michael Flynn, and all these other people going to jail for lying to Congress or supposedly or the FBI. And then you see people like just recently McCabe, who was the assistant director of the FBI, accused of lying numerous times to the FBI, to people in authority. He's let go. Just recently, Bill Barr said, no. There's no problem here. Now, if all the elements of the crime are met, which they were, a similar fact situation to Roger Stone, why did Roger Stone go through hell? Because he was a Trump supporter. And McCabe, who's actually a globalist Jesuit shill, gets off scot-free because they want to show you there's a two-tier system. And that's Bill Barr. So don't listen to this garbage that you're ever going to get justice. Watch as each one of them get let off. Comey first was the first one. He didn't get in. He lied just like Roger Stone did. He's gone. He's let free. Then you got McCabe, and it's going to go right down. And don't worry, you're going to see a two-tier justice system. But back to the Jesuits. And I wish Bill Barr would also mention that's one of his. He must be in their pocket as well. Playing the other side of the coin, by the way. But Philip was equally disposed to the favor of the Jesuits, presumably for their, the Jesuits really, the whole idea of this was, how can we get people to do things for us and keep the power, to work for us? Jesuits, for securing this, were allowed to go through with it. And to show how little obedience was paid to the public authorities of either Spain or Portugal, it is only necessary to observe that each reduction, each one of these tests that they were doing on the natives was governed by a Jesuit father, by a priest, supported by a vicar and a curate as assistants, but whose chief duty was espionage. This governing father was under the orders of a superior, who presided over a diocese of 5 or 6 parishes, the supervision and management of the whole being lodged in the hands of a provincial, who received his orders direct from the general in Rome. If, therefore, The kings of Spain and Portugal supposed that the Jesuits in Portugal intended to pay fidelity to them, or to either of them. They were deceived, as in the course of events they discovered. They obeyed their general in Rome, and him alone. Now, to praise out not to be withheld from Jesuits that the natives, who were thus brought under their influences, were better and more kindly treated than those who were compelled to submit to the dominion of the Spaniards and Portuguese beyond the limits of Paraguay. So here's basically what's going on. They partook of their labors, so they're working for the Jesuits, of their amusements, of their joys, of their sorrows, all of it controlled. They visited daily every house in which lay a sick person, whom they served as the kindest nurse, and to whom they seemed to be ministering all the time. By these and other kindnesses, they brought the Indians to look upon them with a feeling bordering upon idolatry. So here we have the exact thing going. Let's make an example here. We have a group of young people in our country growing up without the idea of being able to buy a house. They're under debt with student loans. They seem to see the American dream wiped away. So what happens? Here comes Father Bernie Sanders. We'll take care of you. The state will take care of you. Don't worry. But it's going to end up just like Venezuela. Don't worry. It's going to end up just like these natives ended up, doing all the work for a few people, the Jesuits in this case, who profited immensely. And they got basically pittance. They got whatever the Jesuits wanted to give them. That was it. They had no choice. And by these and other kindnesses, they brought the natives there to look upon them as gods, because they used the Spaniards and the Portuguese as foils. You don't want to be controlled by the big bad Portuguese. You don't want to be in Bernie Sanders. You don't want to be controlled by the big bad Trump. But while they were friends, they were also sovereigns, you see, and governed with absolute and unquestioned authority, these Jesuits. This was a necessary and indispensable part of their system of government, which embodied the Jesuit idea of a Christian republic. The same fascistist type of republic that flies from Christianity today. Romanism, and more specifically Jesuitism, is militant Christianity come into its own. It was in everything pertaining to the management of these public affairs, in absolute monarchy, that they created there, with all its power centered in the general at Rome. This is fact and history. Why don't we hear about this? Why doesn't Bernie Sanders tell the kids this? Because they're not going to. If they told them the truth, their system they go down the drain right there. Whose authority was accepted as equal to that of a god, to whose command obedience was extracted from all? Do you want to live like that? Look, America, kid, listen, if you're listening and you're a millennial, and you think socialism is the answer, look, America's not perfect, but I'd rather trust you. Trust yourself. Trust yourself and your own ambitions and your own goals, no matter where you're living, where you can still make your own choices. Because if you allow Bernie Sanders, if you allow the Jesuits here to take over, you're going to end up just like these natives in Paraguay. Because there, everything was conducted in obedience to them. Even meat was portioned from the public slaughterhouses in the same way. But the earnings of the whole were deposited in what? Common storehouses. This is in the Jesuit Reductions, at each Jesuit Reduction. And distributed by who? The Jesuits, in such portions to each individual as necessity required. So do you want them to do that to you here? Trust yourself. Trust, even though the American system isn't perfect, it's better than this. It's exactly, we have certain things we can change. For example, the Federal Reserve Bank system. If we work together, we could change it. Because it isn't a federal system. It's controlled, our system is controlled by a number of foreign banks. So, the surplus produced from these reductions was sent to Europe and sold in exchange for wares and merchandise sold at the discretion of the Jesuits. They got rich. Everything was conducted in obedience to them, and nothing contrary to their orders was tolerated. Rigid rules of conduct and hours of labor were prescribed. That's what's going to happen to you. And the violators of them were subject to the corporal punishment. Talk to the people in Venezuela. Don't you listen? And don't listen to this garbage when they tell you this is not going to be that type of socialism. This is going to be this. No, it's all the same. It's just incremental. It always gets to that. Houses of worship, colleges, and palatial residences for the Jesuit fathers were built by the common laborers and the Paraguay Reductions at the expense of the common treasury. Suffrage was universal, but the sanction of the Jesuits was necessary to the validity of the election. In fact, says a quote from that time, the Jesuits, quote, substituted themselves for the state or the community, a fact which fully establishes the monarchy and the theocratic character of this group, and they have not changed today. So take this and send it out to people. Send it to your congressmen. Ask them about socialism. Really, and who created it? Are they going to not go back? And they don't want you to read this stuff. It makes it too difficult for them. Because they don't even want you to know who these people are. Because they are the people in the background controlling them. And I think we should get rid of all of them, to be honest with you, and start over, but we can't. So we got to do our best in getting this information out. Back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.